Now please welcome David Peterson, talking about telling stories with linked data, Australian War Memorial. Thanks, David.
Thank you. All right, yes, my talk is on bringing history alive, telling stories with linked data and open source tools. This is in large part inspired by the work I'm doing with Adam at the Australian War Memorial. So I'd like to have a special thanks to Adam, this is Twitter feed, and special thanks to the DDU people for having this conference. It's been good, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to speak. My name is David Peterson, and I work with Previous Next. I've been doing Drupal things for 3 or 4 years, and Semantic Web for 6 or 7 years, and Web for 17 years. So I've got quite a long background. I live in Tasmania. I work with, as I said, Previous Next, so I'm a bit remote. So I suppose I'm the second overseas person because there's somebody in New Zealand. So Tasmania is almost like another country. So essentially, I want to talk about 3 main points, and also how this relates to site architecture in a Drupal site, and how information flow can work, and how you can kind of think about your information in a kind of a different way instead of a traditional site architecture. So the 3 main points are you're dealing with things that are in the real life, no matter if you're creating a website, if you're doing things, it's not just text, it's not just a CSV file, it's not just a PDF. These are actually real things that have occurred at some time, either today or tomorrow, or nearly 100 years ago in case of this. The other main point is the fact that no matter what information you have, you're only ever dealing with part of the picture. Most database systems and most content management systems and most things like that, you tend to do your data model. You tend to think you have all your information, but effectively you never do quite know the entire picture. There's always somebody else who has a little bit more to add. And the third main point is that everything is connected. The web is connected, people are connected, things are connected to each other. So first off, we're going to kick into you're dealing with things that are real in real life. So right now, we're sort of going into a period of transition between what's kind of traditionally the web of documents, which would be most of the web right now. We have lots of text. This is just an example from the Australian War Memorial, but I mean, you could copy and paste any website picture in there, and you're literally just dealing with a web of documents. The transition, though, is moving more towards something essentially called the web of things. This is something that Tim Berners-Lee, who invented the web, has been really keen to push as well. And things like Facebook with the Open Graph, they've also been kind of pushing this and making it a bit more mainstream and kind of really pushing this at their Facebook conferences and things like that. In some ways, they're kind of trying to subsume the entire web, so not the web of things, but the web of Facebook, maybe. So there might be a little bit too far in that respect. So some of the things that we were actually talking about, there's real people, talking about places, events that occurred, and documents. And I'd like to probably say too, we're working with the memorial. There's quite a lot of things that are going on. In 2015 is the 100th year anniversary of the commemoration of the entry into World War I. So there's a lot of things that are going on, and so we've been working with Adam and the memorial to start to kind of think of ideas and start to implement plans. And last year, before Anzac Day, we got Adam and his crew did most of the work, got the Drupal 7 site up and running, which is the initial foundation of this platform, these platform ideas. So it was quite a major event to actually get Drupal in a government organization like that. It's a very conservative organization, very Windows dominated. If there was a free alternative, they would find a closed source Microsoft version of it, which I think is a very traditional thing. So again, nothing about the memorial, but Adam has really been pushing open source and things. And we actually met at a conference a few years ago. I was talking about a Semantic Web Drupal site that I had put together, and we had some good conversations. So one of the core things that will help to create this sort of web of things is actually something just called persistent URLs. And Drupal is quite good about that. It uses like a /node/1. That's kind of the base persistent URL. And until that content is deleted, it will stay the same. But it's not a very pretty URL. But at least it's persistent. And one of the key things is the fact that we need to have persistence in URLs so that when somebody links to that content, it still exists in tomorrow, next day, and in the future. So essentially, everything needs to have its own address. And that address should not change, so it's fairly common. The other thing that will help to create the web of things is something like shared understanding, which that does essentially was actually talking to somebody earlier about this, and it gave a bit of an early preparation for this. How do you know when I say something, does it mean what somebody else said? In Drupal, we all create node types, for instance. We all create fields, but I might name my field, for instance, surname. But in the States, it'd be last name. I mean, that's a very minor difference. But there's no way of really saying that my content type is equal to your content type. So when these things are being indexed by Google or even by internal search engines, unless you manually kind of tie things together, you don't actually get that sort of automatic shared understanding. So how do you kind of combat that? Well, the one is vocabularies. And again, Drupal's really good at that. Taxonomy has been core to Drupal from the get-go, basically, and being able to create new taxonomies quite quickly and add that taxonomy to multiple content types is quite easy to do. So Drupal internally has this kind of a notion of shared understanding. You can share fields and share vocabularies. But again, in the global sense, even two Drupal sites that get spun up with the same content, the same vocabularies, there isn't any necessarily, other than the fact that maybe the same person built the sites. So one of the things that actually is kind of working towards this is schema.org, which launched earlier last year. It was an initiative by Google, Microsoft, or Bing, and Yahoo, even though Yahoo doesn't really do search anymore, so it was mostly just Google and Microsoft. But what it was the first time they basically took all the ideas of the semantic web that never quite worked, and that been spending for probably 10 years. And I think in about a weekend, they kind of developed, I mean, granted, they were one of the main people that actually built schema.org actually invented RDF. He works for Google and invented kind of the notion of the semantic web. So it wasn't literally like a bunch of school kids doing it. And schema.org essentially is a one-stop shop to help to start to describe content. And I can switch to schema.org here. So it's a fairly basic-looking site. I have a very slow 3G connection, sorry. What is schema.org? I'm not going to go through that. I kind of just gave a very quick overview of that. Schemas themselves. So this is kind of the nuts and bolts of what is on offer. You can do a search, which is quite nice. You can search for job, for instance. Maybe you have a job sharing site or a job listing site. You can click on search. And you can see what Google has to say for job. So straight away, the first one is job posting. So Google has a definition for job posting. So what you can do is you can say, OK, well, I've modeled a job in Drupal. I've got a few fields. And hopefully this is readable. I can increase the size a bit. So there's a bit of a hierarchy, too. It's a thing. It's an intangible thing. And it's a job posting. And basically what you do is you just start matching up your fields to what Google is calling them. The reason you want to do this is you also get something called Google Rich Snippets. I can show that super quick as well. Sorry, I've got 800 tabs open. I apologize. Here I did one earlier. And to be honest, it was a real pain in the ass to actually get this to work, because if anyone is aware, Google just recently switched on their authorship thing, Google+, when they basically said that it wasn't going to affect search rankings. But there's also a few blog posts that are out that are basically saying that Google is altering their search rankings to favor people who are linking their content to their G+ account, and that's being carried over. So if you were doing a search for Chris Smither, who's an artist from the States, you would get a rich snippet. So there's actually a photo. You could actually get a few more information, because normal Google result is just the title and the body text. And also it shows authorship. So there's me. I authored the content this morning. I couldn't get it to work, and all the tutorials said you should be able to get it to work. And what happened is literally like a few days ago they switched on that you have to have content authorship in there. So it's the whole, they're saying they're doing it for a good reason, but of course they're promoting their own content to get you people to use their G+ accounts rather than something else called Facebook, I believe. It's pretty obvious. So anyways, I couldn't get it to work, and I was going crazy. And I was just like, oh, God, I was going to show this. It was going to be great. It was a nice example. About 30 minutes before this, I got it to work. And I was actually talking to Christian about that. So it was good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show how you can actually do this with your Drupal 7 site now. It's very easy to do, actually. So I just spun up a Drupal 7 site earlier today. And I created a few different content types. Hopefully you can see that. So I've got article and basic page. We get that out of the box. I created a musical artist and a track. I I didn't get track to work, again, because of the authorship. But musical artist is just a person. So I'm just going to click on edit. The only thing you need to do is there's a Schemaorg module that you need to add. And I'll have all the notes and things like that. I'll put, probably edit my actual the Drupal Down Under thing, and then the presentation will be online as well. All that does is it adds, you can ignore the RDF settings, it adds a schema.org settings tab. And in there is an autocomplete. So this is the same autocomplete list as you can see as I start typing person. So I'll click on person. So that list matches. I'll go to the full definition here so you can see it's quite comprehensive. A lot of people in Semantic Web were very disappointed that schema.org didn't include everything, which is the reason why the Semantic Web vocabularies never did quite get anywhere. But it's a fairly comprehensive list, and here they have a nice hierarchy. So there's thing, there's creative work, and that kind of links to article, blog post. You can see there's a nice hierarchy here. So I can scroll through, and as you can see, I'm just at the very top. There's quite a few different objects in here: recipe, photograph, painting, web page, and I think they just recently added a new vocabulary for news articles for quite large news agencies like CNN and NBC and things like that. And that was our news vocabulary was just kind of subsumed into this one organization. Anyways, it's quite comprehensive, and they have a nice, I'm sure, a Google-powered search engine right there. And you can click on any one of these, which is really nice. So let me find person. I'll click on, click on person. So it makes it really easy you create some content types, and now you want to mark them up with how Google thinks they should be shared in a global vocabulary. So by default, you need to have at least these 4 fields for Google to even, you need to have, first off, it has to be say it's a person, and then you need to have at least these 4 fields in there: description, image, name, and URL. And Drupal out of the box gives you everything except image but the body field becomes a description, name is title, and URL is just, of course, the URL of the node itself. So you just have to add an image to your thing, and you have to call it an image. So again, it's quite nice and quite simple to do. But as I scroll down, you can see that it goes way beyond that. There's additional name, there's affiliation, birth date, death date, email. So you can get quite specific and quite detailed. So you can basically describe people from history, from stories, fictional, on and on. So that's, and it gives, and the other nice thing too is it actually gives you a little bit of information on what that is. So the beauty of this is that if somebody comes to your Drupal site, or if somebody's working on it, they can actually, you're actually encoding what your fields are, and it's a standardized encoding. And so I can then go to Google here, and I can actually say, okay, well, what did you mean by children? Or it's quite basic, of course, but it actually gives you that understanding. So let me jump back to my site. So here's a person. So I'm saying that this node is about a person. So again, that's good. I'll go to the fields. So sorry, I should also say too that this is going to be a bit code-based and a bit site-building based. So it's going to be kind of on the abstract notion too of larger concepts of semantic web and site building. But it'll also say how we can actually do all these things in Drupal 7 right now, and why this is also a beneficial thing. I probably should have said that initially. Sorry. So here's image. I just dropped the image field in. You get that automatically in Drupal. But I'll click on edit. I've already edited this, of course, because that's why I have a rich snippet working. And again, Christian had the luxury of watching me do this in real time. So again, I'll scroll down all the way to the bottom of that field definition. So again, this is, if people have ever built a content type before, it's all the same, except it adds it's a little block. Image schema.org mapping, and again, it's just image, so it's quite basic. So again, it's the autocomplete. So I type image, click save. Effectively, when that was done, this was supposed to work, and you're supposed to get rich snippets. It didn't, and I spent an hour and a half pulling my hair out, just thinking, oh, this would have been a really good presentation. I'm really wasting my time. I should be preparing. But I Googled it. Can I Google it for you link? I Googled site attribution thing because they're talking about that, and somebody 2 days ago posted a blog entry why they couldn't get it to work either, and they were lovely enough to actually post the exact details. And I have a G+ account which I don't use, but what you have to do to get this to work and I can, again, this is just from 2 days ago, is you have to add a little this is me thing on there. So I don't want to get too detailed because it's a little bit off track, but you log into your G+ account if you have one, and you link back to the site saying that I am an author of that site. So you create that relationship of saying that I am David, and I write for the ddu.grasslands.net site. And then you need to add an authorship link on that content. I'll click on these. Let me go to the node page. So here's the node page. I just copied and pasted this text in from Wikipedia. There's the image, and there's the little, they also give you a nice little snippet thing you can just copy and paste in. I'll click on edit, just so you can see what it is. And if people are used in Microformats, there was the whole kind of, if you could actually write Microformats. So Microformats is kind of a precursor to this. Microformats allowed you to describe events and people and some basic relationships. But it was quite limited, and it borrowed CSS classes. So it was great. It was quite innovative, and it's still used on a lot of sites. What schema.org has done is they've adopted something called microdata, which, if anybody's familiar with HTML5, is the preferred way of embedding metadata into your content. So schema.org uses microdata. And again, originally they weren't going to support RDF, which is the W3C standard, which again caused a huge shitstorm, essentially, because of six or 7 years of time had been spent building this RDFA thing, and then Drupal 7 launched with RDFA and core, so it was just, yeah, great. And then basically a few months later, Google said, well, we're not supporting RDFA anymore, it's all microdata. So all this work that has been done, and this great thing about Drupal 7 supporting RDFA basically didn't work for about 7 months, and so it was a bit difficult. But then, again, about 2 months ago, there was kind of a powwow up in the Bay Area. And they basically said, oh, well, we can agree to disagree, but sure, we'll support RDFA. So everything's good again. So that's why I can get this to work. 2 months ago, this wouldn't have worked. And 2 days ago, it didn't work either. It's a moving target. So here's the text. It's just a plain text field. And this is all I did. It's just a little bit of text here. And again, I'm only describing this. It's kind of a little bit of a sidetrack, but I just want to show things that you can actually do and that are actually quite useful. And you can't get it to work unless you put some sort of attribution in there. You don't need the image tag. That's just Google just likes to get extra page hits, I suppose, with that, and tracking codes. But what you need to do is you have to have rel equals author, and then you point to your G+ account. And I think, I was talking to Christian about this, I think you could actually use any canonical ID. Could be Facebook, could be Twitter.
Could you theme the author link that Drupal generates?
Yes. I thought about actually doing a TPL override or something like that to be really fancy, but I didn't have enough time. But yes, that would be, I was actually thinking that would be a nice little contrib module, actually. It's super simple, a field formatter to write. Yes, Bevan?
If you did that, it would then not link to the user's profile page on the website. Is there a way that you can maintain that relationship and still have a link to the author's page on the website? Yeah, that's a bit tricky. What you'd have to do is, to repeat the question is, because Drupal.org, Drupal automatically has a hyperlink, but it hyperlinks to their user page. And so Bevan was asking, so if you're now changing that link to point to your G+ account, now you're not linking to your Drupal page. So I guess I haven't really thought about that one. You'd probably maybe do some sort of rel equals author and maybe have a little icon of a person, and that would hyperlink to Google, and then your name would maybe hyperlink to your Drupal to your site account or something like that. But yeah, that's true. You're kind of hijacking that. And of course, Google is interested in that because they're pushing people back to G+, which I'm not sure how many people are using it or not. But they're definitely, by promoting this, they're definitely heavily saying use G+ because we will boost your search score.
What if you don't want to name? If you're just the content editor and you don't want to.
The question is, what if you don't want your name to be showing up? So what if it was somebody who's actually literally copying and pasting in content and they didn't write it? Again, I believe that what you could do is you could have a site author. So you have a G+ account for your organization. and then link to that. So the organization would be the author, to something like that. So essentially what they're trying to do, they're just trying to set, again, and also G+ had a bit of a thing with you need to use your real name. So I'm not sure where that's gone or not, but essentially they're trying to become an identity server, again, for something called Facebook as a counteraction, I'm sure. And because, and then waving a little bit of a carrot and saying, well, we don't boost your score, we don't boost your search ranking, but we kind of do. So wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you probably should use this, but we're not forcing you to use it. So yes, you could not, you could actually decide to remove this. But if I actually remove this, which I'll actually do that, we'll see if that works. I'll save this page. I should have done a revision of that. I didn't, I think I just deleted it. There we go. I just removed the authorship, and I refreshed this snippet testing tool, and it's gone. And you see what it says is, this page does not contain authorship or rich snippet markup. Well, I know it does contain rich snippet art markup. It doesn't contain authorship. And it says, oh, well, how do you find out? Learn more. And it's just a big ad for using G+. So here's the Google News thing I was talking about. So this is being used by big news organizations in the States. I believe NBC and Reuters sponsored this vocabulary and pushed it into schema.org because they're very powerful. And it lets you do lots of attribution. You get lots of links. You get written by so-and-so. You get lots of other little things in there and CL sources. And so that's what Google's really pushing. And they really want big news organizations to use these vocabularies. And again, Chris Burns, I'd imagine, probably doesn't link to his NBC profile or something. It probably links to his G+ account. And here's the two options. So new, option 1, add your name and email to your content. And there you go. There's G. So you know, they're definitely pushing G+. So it's a bit unfortunate. Microsoft hasn't yet launched with rich snippets, but they will. And so, but they'll probably be pushing their own thing. So anyways, it's a bit of an aside, but you'll see that nothing changed here other than the fact that I removed my name from it. So Google now is taking me out. So I actually had this, and I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working, and it took forever to, and finally I added that little line of authorship, and I linked it back in. Yes?
Have you tried having that snippet? Oh, sorry. Have you tried having that snippet with the G+ link, but either hiding it with CSS or not having any? No,
I literally tried it 30 minutes ago when I started doing it. So no, I was just happy to get it in place. Yes, Robert?
Facebook does it with just like a metadata. Where you put your IP on the top. Seems like a lot of this, I don't know when it came out. You know, I never actually have done it with Google. I've always done it with Facebook. But you know, the Open Graph, it's very similar to the Open Graph. Even that tool that you're using is very similar to Facebook's URL linter. That kind of tells you whether or not, and your content won't show up unless you have your ID.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because actually, schema.org was Microsoft and Google's response to Facebook.
It seems like they should, like, did they have any effort to kind of integrate? Maybe it kind of sucks that people who want to have their content social, or now even with Google, with their whole attempt to be social, it kind of sucks that we have to have two different services and basically use two different schema libraries.
To make this, to participate in Google's playground and in Facebook's playground, you need to use this schema.org stuff, and you need to install a Facebook module in your Drupal site to get your terms, the Open Graph terms, in the head of your content.
Seems like a good contrib module would be like put it
you could kind of marry them together so you could do your metadata in one place, and it's OpenID. that is the nice way of somebody raised the thing saying OpenID. So I mean, that doesn't pay the bills though, unfortunately. I think all right, so I just kind of had a quick go through of schema.org and why that's useful and why the shared understanding is taking place. So I've created a person on my Drupal site. I've marked them up with some terms. I've bowed down to the devil, and I get rich snippets in return and a little bit of a boost in search ranking. So that's good. Unfortunately, the Semantic Web people are happy about that, but they're sad that it's Google doing it. So here's just, just in case I didn't have an internet connection, I did have a few screenshots. So you might see that. It was just in case, but luckily my internet connection is sort of holding out. And then, I mentioned the Facebook Open Graph. So that's the other example of using this. And again, the whole like button, and you get your content to kind of show up in Facebook, and people can like it and all that kind of stuff. So Facebook did it first. Google and Microsoft come along second. And I think done it a bit better. But yes, there is no integration. And there never will be. unless they buy Facebook, but they won't. FOF is another example, too, of a vocabulary that is kind of was used. It kind of describes...
Before you go on and get off of schema.org, is there any relationship or association with the Dublin Core metadata project?
No. They have subsumed the terms.
The same kind of thing.
They have subsumed the terms, and you can, luckily, with schema.org, we're started with Microdata and RDFA, and that you can embed the DC terms, the vocabularies in your content, and schema, and they just ignore it. So you still get your content is still indexed properly, and it shows up, and you're just all these things can overlay on top of each other. So you can have Facebook Open Graph stuff in your head. You can have RDFA, which marks up your DC terms and FOF and other vocabularies, and then also Facebook. Facebook actually uses RDFA. And you can have microdata all on the same page. It can be HTML, it can be XHTML 1.1, it can be RDFA. They don't care. They just look at all the metadata there, and they just love it. It helps them do their job better. So you can integrate them. And originally, schema.org said, no, if you include any other vocabulary other than ours, we won't index your content. So again, it was kind of that, it's either with us or against us. And then they had this big meetup, and there was, again, quite a good discussions. And then they decided, OK, well, we will ignore other terms, but you can still embed them. And another vocabulary is geonames. They're kind of like the OpenStreetMaps of web services. They have every single place, and you can add places to them, and there's web services and all those sorts of things. And they also have canonical URLs, so you can use those geonames as vocabulary terms. And also the New York Times, as I was talking about earlier, they publish their own vocabularies and things like that online, and R News and things like that, which is a way of marking up news content. Let's see how I'm doing in time. What time does it end? 3:30? Sorry. 3:15? Oh, geez. Should hurry up. Sorry. Vocabularies. So we just talked about vocabularies, why they're good. Schema.org is a good place to start. You can start marking up probably 80–90% of your content. You'll find it there. But you might not be able to, for instance, with a memorial, schema.org doesn't really describe World War I events very well. It makes sense. They're describing things, musicians and rock stars and movies and things like that. So what do you do when you hit the brick wall? Well, you can create your own vocabularies. So there's something fairly complex called ontologies, which I won't go into much detail on, which essentially it's a very philosophical way of describing the relationships between things. And hierarchies and things like that, and how everything's related. Thesaurus, the thesauri, again, that's basically what Drupal's vocabularies are. Just think about Drupal vocabulary is a thesaurus, and would be kind of a SCOS format, which again, those are W3C. I don't want to talk about them very much. And there are some vocabulary tools available. So you can, again, think of your Drupal 7 site as a vocabulary tool. You can create a vocabulary, great. You can mark up your content with it, perfect. You can add microdata terms, schema.org terms to it, and you can get shared understanding, and you've gone a long way towards things. But if you have multiple sites and you need to have a shared vocabulary between 1, 2, or 2, 3, 100, 1,000 sites, you need a vocabulary server of some sort. So again, that could be a Drupal site that's sitting there that has the canonical vocabularies that get synchronized. I know the XML import-export module exists for Drupal 7, and I've heard somebody saying that works quite well. So you can create your vocabulary on that and have it shooting out, like emanating XML, and the other sites can have the same module installed and it can synchronize. So you make your vocabulary updates on the one server. The other sites, maybe on a cron run or something like that, can go back and kind of ping the main site and then update itself. So that's quite nice. Neologism is, again, it's a very semantic web, very academic kind of tool, but it's a Drupal 6 site that you can, it's a distribution. It lets you create full-on semantic web vocabularies as nodes, essentially, and you can do all the links together, so it's quite nice. Struct ontology, and this is kind of the big daddy of them all. Again, it's Drupal-based, which is great. It's a company in the United States doing that. And again, it's kind of takes it up to another level, and you can actually create an ontology within Drupal and share that. So again, we've touched on HTML data. So RDFA. So this is really nice because again, because of schema.org launched, and all of a sudden, basically they were saying RDFA sucks. No one will ever use it because we're Google and we said microdata, use microdata. The RDFA community, which had spent 6 years doing this, and they worked with the Drupal community to get this in things like that. They basically had kind of a coming to terms of things like, do they just decide to be very protective and very academic and say, no, 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 we can describe everything in the world, and if you don't get it, you're too dumb. Or they said, well, actually microdata has some good ideas because it's really simple and it's really kind of copy and paste. So they came out with RDFA 1.1 Lite, which it looks identical to microdata. There's just very few differences. So the great thing about that is what they've done is essentially they've put the data models together, and that's why that example I was showing works quite well earlier. So here's another, let me just, again, so normally you'd have a div tag, there's a person's name, and then there's their photo. So again, there's that image thing that you saw earlier. I typed image into the Drupal, and I typed person into Drupal. So this is how it actually is being marked up into code. It's quite simple. It only adds a few extra things. But then Google comes along, and then again, just recently added was that authorship thing, which is their way of forcing people to use G+. But there's the person, there's the name, and the image. And you saw me typing those in. And that's the actual code. It's quite clean. And then that's what Google indexes and reads. And now it knows that I'm talking about a person, and this is their name, and this is the photo of that person. It knows it's a real person and things like that. And here's another example of for instance, here's how you can extend vocabularies. And you can start adding in other vocabularies onto that. So here's your schema term, schema.org term, microdata. And here's your RDFA term. So all they're adding is FOF to that, but it actually points to different vocabularies. So you can actually mix and match vocabularies, which you were mentioning about DC terms. Microdata. Here's just an example from their site. So again, you'll see that all they've done is they've taken, sorry. Here's the text that a person would see on the page. So again, that's traditionally has been the way that search engines, Google would then use natural language processing and all their Google-ness and try to pull out something from that. What they really want us to do is actually to mark up our content better so that Google doesn't have to do such a job of things. So here again, I've marked this up as being a place. And in microdata, you add item scope. And this is HTML5 stuff, so this is, again, a different thing. But you add an item scope to a containing div tag. And what you're basically saying is everything inside that div tag is something. And then you have an item type, and that something is a place. You can actually copy and paste that URL in, go into a browser, and you can read what you're talking about. So that's, again, kind of the whole looking up the definition. So that's pretty cool. And the key thing is now there's an item prop geo. And again, this links, sorry, it's cut off, but it would link to lat long. And then here's you're marking up latitude, longitude. Now Google knows you're talking about a place, and that place are these coordinates. There's no natural language processing. You're exposing your data fields to your HTML, and then other things can use that for good or for evil. Microformats was the other one, which again is very, it's not, there's a Microformats too, but I don't know, I wouldn't really waste my time with that. Named entity extraction. So again, now you imagine, okay, now we've got all these vocabularies, great. We know how to create them. We've done these things, but now we've got 200,000 articles in our database. No one's going to go in and manually start tagging all those pieces of content. It's great when you start creating a new site, because all the new content, you can tag things, you can do other things like that. So something called named entity extraction allows us to actually do that. So what is it? Automatically tag your stuff. So if people might have heard of something called Caillat. It's a Drupal module. I believe it's for Drupal 7. That's a free web service up to a point, and you basically pass in text, and you get back tags from it. Here's just a quick illustration. So unstructured text goes into Caillat, and it comes out as either named entities, facts, events, so on and so forth. So you get some nice tags from that. Yahoo term extraction is another one. There's a Drupal module for that. Apache Istanbul, excuse me, which is a newer initiative by Apache to essentially create an open source version of Caillat. And the nice thing about that is that you actually create your own vocabularies. So when you're passing in your text, rather than using Caillat's vocabularies or Yahoo's vocabularies, you use your own vocabularies that you just created. So that's quite nice. And that's, again, it's from a few months ago. It's quite easy to spin up your own instance. Again, this is quite technical, so we'll just ignore it. But you can SVN, download it, make it, install it. It's your own to use. It's got a RESTful interface, which is really nice to plugging into. And it analyzes your text. Uses your own vocabulary. So again, here's a little diagram of what it's doing. So it's taking your content management system, Drupal for instance, Drupal sends its text to Stanbul. Stanbul does its semantic yada yada, whatever, and sends it back as tags based on your vocabularies. And then those become your vocabularies in Drupal, and they're marked up with microdata, schema.org stuff, and again, you get rich snippets, and the world is great. Okay, that's part one. Part two is, so we've talked about, I've had these demos are taking a bit of time. Part two is you only have part of the picture. So this is the whole notion of open world, closed world. So generally, the definition of closed world is pretty much how we all build sites and how we all build kind of model data. Is we create a table called person. It's got full name, email address, a few extra fields, bio, and then that's it. And so we're basically saying all those fields define that person. And if you don't have one of those fields, you can't play in my playground. You're a null, or something like that. Open world basically says, well, okay, I'm going to start with first name, last name, phone number, things like that. But there probably is more information about that person than I know. So you begin your entire data modeling or your entire thought process that I actually don't know everything about this. I only know a small snippet, and probably somebody else on the web has more information on it. And so you actually model and that's the semantic web is modeled on the open world philosophy, is that you only have a part of the picture, and somebody else has more content to add to it. So how do you allow for the unknown? Well, you don't use strict unchangeable definitions. Again, Drupal's quite good about that. You can go to your content type, add extra fields, change your fields, things like that. So that's pretty cool. JSON as a data format is quite nice as well, because you can kind of just add a couple extra fields to it. It's just quite fluid in that sense. And using databases, like a NoSQL database or a graph database, again, they're document databases. They're not table type databases. And here's an example of, this is some work that I did with Dig. Sorry if I don't want to repeat this too much. But what we needed to do here was come up with a definition. This is a Drupal 6 site of REM. And of course, the ABC and all their knowledge doesn't have the de facto definition of REM. And so they knew that, and they admitted that. It was the first time they ever allowed actually to have other content in their site under a banner of theirs that they actually hadn't written. And so these are all the different APIs that we actually tapped into. Wikipedia, YouTube. I'll try to speed up here. Sorry, everyone. And I had to do a little splashy thing there. MusicBrainz, Discogs, the ABC themselves. And again, here's some more content. So we've got Twitter. Simon is in the room. He's working on this project and on the multi-platform. And so he's extended this way beyond what I originally did. So I'm not trying to take credit for that. Simon actually did a lot of that stuff. So he's right back there. So here's the different APIs that we and Simon have since put in place. So you see there's quite a few bit of information that basically saying that we don't know everything about REM. We have a bit of content about them, but here's all the other things like that. So that's kind of the open world principle. And sometimes it's quite hard to accept the fact that you really don't know everything. It's kind of like a multi-step process of like admitting that you don't know, and then you're saying admitting your failures and the whole thing, the 12-step program. So I think I wrote down 5 steps here. I won't bore you with them, but I actually did spend time going through 5 steps. It did sound quite funny, but I don't have enough time to go through them. And I had mentioned earlier with Drupal content types, you can easily model things with content types, fields, and Drupal 7 plays well with the web. It's quite nice. So I'm going a bit faster now. And lastly, everything is connected. There's a demo at the very end I'm really keen to show. How it all kind of fits together and how we built a really nice image management tool in Drupal. So everything is linked together. And so I don't know if you've heard of the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. And there's an Oracle of Kevin Bacon site. I think it's a fairly common thing, but I'll describe it anyways. I won't have a show of hands who knows it or not. Kind of sick of that whole show of hands thing. So Kevin Bacon has starred in lots of movies, and so there was this notion of like how separate is one movie star from Kevin Bacon. And so the notion was that there's only ever 6 degrees separating Kevin Bacon and any movie star that there is. So I tested that with quite a few different things. And so Harrison Ford, that was a bit an easy one. And so Harrison Ford has a Bacon number of 2. So Harrison Ford was in Heart of Darkness with Lawrence Fishburne, and Lawrence Fishburne was in Mystic River with Kevin Bacon. So both quite good movies. So again, there you've got Harrison Ford, Heart of Darkness, Lawrence Fishburne, Mystic River, and there's Kevin Bacon. So this is a great site. You can type in. They actually use IMDb as the back end, so it auto-completes as you type. And I was just typing in random names, and one of them was an actress that I'd never heard of, and her bacon factor was, I think, 8. So I thought, oh, this doesn't work. But she was actually a porn film star, so I guess it doesn't quite work for porn and things like that. But he is actually related to porn stars through 8 links. So porn does break the bacon factor. So lastly, or getting to the point of the giant global graph. So again, Tim Berners-Lee coined the WWW, the World Wide Web. And the original World Wide Web was very much actually semantic. The links all actually were describing, like rel equals author. That actually existed in the very first browser that he created. And like this pointed to a document, this pointed to a person, this pointed to an event. But, and then it all went away because it was too hard. And so it was just links to documents. Then I think in 2007, he coined a blog post actually on a Drupal site. MIT used Drupal 5 blog engine. And there's a very kind of eminent article on the giant global graph. And it is actually, it's like a node/345 or something like that. So it's a Drupal site, which is pretty cool. And in it, he talks about, essentially, it's not the documents, it's the things they are about which are important. Obvious, really. And again, I mean, it's obvious, of course, now. It's not literally just the entire document, but it's the things that they're about, the vocabularies and the shared understanding. And you know, Facebook Open Graph has, again, it's kind of been out for a little while, and so sort of the beginning of the semantic web in some ways. There's an example of a person. You know, this is a very actually RDFA kind of thing. You know, it's a person that's a subject predicate object. Sorry, but it's just a person who's a friend of somebody else with sunglasses on. User action object, and then you can see subject predicate object. So again, Facebook has made it just easier to understand. They've gotten rid of all the fancy terms and all the semantic web educational stuff of it, and basically just said, you know, we're talking about people, how they interact with something else. This is the linked data cloud. So this is kind of the semantic web's, you know, piece de resistance. And anyways, this has grown substantially. So this is essentially using those vocabularies and then linking them together with other data. So you effectively can kind of start trawling through there and finding information. So you can imagine like one Drupal site in there, again using vocabularies, could start, you know, you could start imagining that these sites start to become interconnected in a way. So it's kind of the giant global graph being realized in a way. That's just kind of zooming in on one portion of it. DBpedia, which is the center of it, is the semantic web version of Wikipedia. So they've taken Wikipedia, they parsed it, and they've turned it into fields and terms and real vocabulary items. I'm not going to go through this. I want to show the demo because I only have a few minutes here. OK, so one thing that we wanted to do with the Australian War Memorial was they have something called their collection database, which has hundreds of thousands of items. And this collection database actually lives on a separate server that we can't touch. But they do have access to the templates. But they needed to be able essentially to be able to take these images and put them in their Drupal site, where they're writing WYSIWYG things or whatever. So normally they could just copy and paste that image. But there's attribution, there's titles, there's links back to the content. There's the notion of licensing that there's going to be adding to the content. So they could go in and start copying and pasting these images into their WYSIWYG fields, but then 3 months, 10 months, 12 months down the line, when they start adding this information too, they could have hundreds of thousands of articles that have just a JPEG in there and maybe copied and pasted information in. But then there's no link back. So what we did is we basically took these templates, which tie into that database, and we put terms into there. We basically said that this is the thing, this is the image, this is the title up here, the image dimensions, the title, the ID number, things like that. So we've described it. We've added vocabularies to it, all the things that I was talking about earlier. I'm not going to go to view source because, again, I don't have enough time and it's a bit boring. So basically, then the use case is somebody goes to the CAS system, which they're all familiar with. They copy that URL, which is cool. They go into Drupal. They go to the content, and there's the image. So to show that this is real, I'll go to another one. So here's the new image, you'll see. And I really hope this works. I'll edit this. I'll actually delete that one. And I won't go into too much detail, but the plugin system for the WYSIWYG editor is an absolute pain in the royal ass, and it's ridiculously messed up, and it's the media. So if anybody's in the media talk with James, I had to really dig into media, and it's just ridiculously complex. So that's why this looks so ugly. So it's just really ugly, but anyways, long story short, it's crazy. And normally, the nice thing would be to actually have the image showing up straight away. So that's not quite ultra great, but that's done. So now I'm going to save this. And again, I've got quite a slow connection, and there you go. So there's the image, there's the title, there's the attribution showing up, and it's actually a live link to that content. If I go back to edit this, you'll see the image does show up now, which is quite nice. So there's the image. But if I actually view the WYSIWYG editor, disable the text, you'll see that it's just a bunch of gobbledygook. It's not actually hyperlinks or anything like that. That maintains a live link. And again, the use case for that was in the future, when they add licensing information to that, when they add tags to that content, when that maybe image changes or they change the title, all they have to do is essentially clear cache or on the content, and effectively then this content dials back home, goes to the CAS site, which is not a Drupal site, which could be any site in the world, but literally it could be any site in the world because we have no access to it, but it's actually still exists in the memorial. And calls back home and says, hey, let me grab your content again, let me grab your image, the copyright information, things like that. And there's actually a little TPL file and all those variables get passed to a TPL file, which I'm not going to go into detail on that. So that lets a person, a themer, just basically edit the TPL file. Actually, I will show that. That's kind of interesting. Sorry, I'm going long. And I actually have an example. I can actually edit that, but I don't have time for that either. So there's a nice little, you see this isn't committed to the repository yet. So again, I apologize for how small this is. But this is just a bunch of div stuff. And you'll see there's little placeholder tags. So when the copyright information does come in, a themer just has to come in here and just go question mark PHP, if I can type, print copyright. I'm not going to say this because it'll throw an error because it doesn't exist. And then they just go in, clear cache on their site, and now they've got copyright information showing up for all those links those hundreds of links that they might have created. You have that live connection to the content, and that was possible by marking up this totally different website with terms, and then we can parse those terms like as if it was a database. But you can imagine that. As more and more sites start using microdata, start using schema.org terms, you can treat each one of those pages as a database. And you can actually parse them and extract content from them and keep kind of that live link in place. So again, it shows kind of an end-to-end point of like, OK, we've spent all this time creating vocabularies and understanding what they're used for. We've marked up our content. We get SEO, which is great. But we've also made an amazing catalog system because everyone, well, I shouldn't say amazing, a nice catalog system, hopefully it's amazing, that has this live link. And also, anyone can go to that CAS, those URLs, and extract that content. So we've also made each one of these pages as an API as well. Literally, you can just pass this through, and you get JSON out of it, marked up with all the copyright information, things like that. It's just a simple parser. I'm using a PHP parser, which takes that and turns it into a bit of a graph, and you can actually just follow that graph. You can say, like, give me the note, give me the image, give me the first image that's there, and give me the copyright information, the width, height, the title, and all that stuff. And it passes that back as a nice little array, and then that's where I'm passing into that TPL file. So again, hopefully I'm showing end-to-end how you can, why it's beneficial to use vocabularies, what we can do with them, and then the actual use case of what it did power for a project for the memorial. So thank you for your time. Sorry for going on. Sure.